In the annals of military history, few technological artifacts have inspired the level of dogmatic faith as the Enigma machine did within the German High Command during the Second World War. This electromechanical rotor cipher machine was not merely a tool for secure communication, it was the cryptographic linchpin of the Blitzkrieg and the silent guardian of the U-boat wolfpacks prowling the Atlantic. The German leadership's belief in its invulnerability was absolute, a conviction so profound that it bordered on technological worship. This unshakable confidence, however, would soon become one of the Third Reich's most catastrophic vulnerabilities. Imagine the scene, a smoke-filled office in Berlin or Wilhelmshaven, the walls adorned with vast maps of Europe and the Atlantic Ocean. On a heavy oak desk, amidst official papers and strategic plans, sits the Enigma machine, a compact, unassuming box of wood and metal with a typewriter keyboard. Its polished surface gleams under the desk lamp, a tangible symbol of German ingenuity. Beside it, newspapers bear triumphant headlines proclaiming the advance of an invincible Germany. For the officers who used it, the machine's complexity was a source of immense pride and security. With its series of interchangeable rotors and a plug board that transposed letters, the Enigma could generate a staggering number of configurations, 150 quintillion possibilities, a figure so vast that the German military believed it mathematically impossible for any adversary to decipher its messages without capturing the machine along with its daily settings. This faith was not merely an unspoken assumption, it was official, enforced doctrine. Directives issued by the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, the Supreme Command of the Armed Forces, strictly forbade any internal discussion or questioning of the Enigma code's potential weaknesses. To even suggest that Enigma could be compromised was seen as defeatism, a failure to appreciate the supremacy of German engineering. This institutional arrogance created a dangerous echo chamber, stifling the very kind of critical analysis that could have identified operational flaws. Any anomalies or surprising enemy successes were attributed to espionage, betrayal, or sheer luck, anything but the unthinkable prospect that their sacred cipher had been broken. This top-down enforcement of infallibility was championed by the highest echelons of power. Grand Admiral Erich Raeder, the formidable commander of the Kriegsmarine, personified this conviction. He personally praised the Enigma for what he termed its flawless mechanical precision. For the German Navy, whose entire U-boat strategy depended on the secrecy of communications between command and the submarines at sea, Enigma's security was non-negotiable. Raeder's confidence reflected a wider sentiment within the military elite. They had constructed a technological fortress so complex and so brilliant that they could not conceive of anyone, anywhere, ever being able to pick the lock. Unseen by these architects of war, however, in the quiet halls of Polish intelligence bureaus and later in the secluded confines of Bletchley Park, a secret war against this very certainty was already being waged, a war of minds that would ultimately turn Germany's greatest cryptographic strength into its most fatal Achilles heel. Long before it became the phantom menace of the Atlantic, the Enigma machine was born from the mind of a single engineer, a product of the post-World War I hunger for secure commercial communication. The story of Enigma begins not in a clandestine military lab, but in Berlin with an electrical engineer named Arthur Scourbius. On February 23, 1918, while the Great War still raged, Scourbius filed a patent for a revolutionary cipher machine that used rotating, wired wheels, rotors, to create a polyalphabetic substitution cipher of unprecedented complexity. His vision was initially commercial. He imagined banks, industrial firms, and stockbrokers using his device to protect their sensitive communications from competitors. The early Enigma machines were sold openly, sophisticated gadgets for a modernizing world. However, the German military, rebuilding in the shadows of the Treaty of Versailles, saw a far greater potential in Scourbius's invention. They adopted a modified, more robust version for their own use, adding features like a plug board that exponentially increased the cryptographic security. It was this military adaptation that would become the backbone of their command structure, a device they believed was utterly and mathematically impregnable. Yet, as Germany's confidence in its new cipher grew, a quiet, desperate battle of wits was taking shape on its eastern border. For the newly reborn nation of Poland, sandwiched between a resentful Germany and an expansionist Soviet Union, intelligence was not a strategic advantage, it was a prerequisite for survival. The Polish Cipher Bureau, Bureau Cyfro, was staffed with some of the nation's brightest minds, tasked with the monumental challenge of penetrating the secrets of their powerful neighbors. In the late 1920s, as they began intercepting an increasing volume of coded German military radio traffic, they realized they were facing a machine-based cipher of extraordinary difficulty. Unlike the British or French, who were largely resigned to the impenetrability of the Enigma, the Poles had no choice but to try and break it. They recruited a team of brilliant young mathematicians from Poznan University, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Rosicki, and Henryk Zygalski, who approached the problem not with the traditional linguistic methods of cryptanalysis, but with the abstract power of permutation theory and group theory. This clandestine intellectual effort was overseen by a figure who seemed to belong more to the world of literature than espionage. In a little-known quirk of history, the writer and poet Jarosław Iwaskiewicz held a supervisory role within the branch of Polish intelligence responsible for decryption. This confluence of the arts and secret statecraft speaks volumes about the national, all-hands-on-deck mobilization of Polish talent. While Iwaskiewicz was crafting novels and poetry that would make him a giant of Polish literature, he was also privy to the secret war being waged against Germany's most advanced technology. His presence in this story is a poignant reminder that the fight against Enigma was not just a technical or military contest, but a cultural and intellectual one, pitting the full spectrum of a nation's ingenuity against a machine designed to be unbeatable. The atmosphere of the time was thick with a strange mixture of professional rivalry and nationalistic tension. A persistent rumor circulated within intelligence circles that German engineers, aware of the high caliber of their Polish counterparts, had allegedly approached some of them with lucrative job offers to work in Berlin. The offers, so the story goes, were politely but firmly refused. Whether true or apocryphal, this anecdote captures the spirit of the era, a grudging acknowledgement of shared technical prowess, overshadowed by an unbridgeable political and patriotic divide. The Polish engineers would not be bought. Their skills were dedicated to the defense of their homeland. It was this dedication that led to the first monumental breakthrough. Using a combination of brilliant mathematical insight, intelligence provided by a French spy, and sheer intellectual persistence, the Polish team achieved the unthinkable. By the end of 1932, Marian Rejewski had successfully deduced the internal wiring of the Enigma's rotors and reflector. This was the key that unlocked the entire system. Over the next several years, the Polish Cipher Bureau was able to read German military communications. They even built their own copies of the Enigma machine and developed electromechanical devices, like the Bombe cryptologiczna, to mechanize and speed up the process of finding the daily keys. For almost 7 years before the outbreak of the Second World War, as the German High Command's faith in Enigma's invincibility solidified into dogma, the Poles were silently listening in, privy to the military secrets of a regime that was preparing to erase their nation from the map. They were the first to prove that the myth of the unbreakable machine was just that, a myth. As the spring of 1939 bled into a tense and ominous summer, the leadership of the Polish Cipher Bureau faced a grim calculus of survival. For years, they had held one of the world's most valuable secrets, the ability to read the encrypted communications of the German military. But the clouds of war were gathering with an undeniable speed, and they knew that Poland would be the first to face the storm. Their cryptanalytical success, born of pure intellectual brilliance, was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The Germans were constantly refining their Enigma procedures, adding layers of complexity that demanded more resources, more time, and more manpower than the Poles could muster alone. The secret that had been their shield was in danger of becoming a memory just when it was needed most. A devastating choice loomed: allow their priceless knowledge to be extinguished with the inevitable invasion, or entrust it to their allies in the West in the desperate hope that it might one day contribute to Germany's ultimate defeat. They chose the latter. In an act of extraordinary strategic foresight and sacrifice, the Polish General Staff authorized the full transfer of their Enigma-breaking intelligence to the British and French. The clandestine initiative was given the operational pseudonym Secrecy, a name that masked a project of world-altering significance. This was not a simple sharing of intelligence reports, it was the handover of the entire intellectual framework of Enigma decryption, the product of nearly a decade of tireless, secret work. It was Poland's ultimate act of defiance, a cryptographic time bomb set to detonate within the Allied intelligence apparatus, whose full impact would only be understood months and years later, particularly within Britain's naval intelligence, which was struggling desperately to gain an edge in the coming battle for the Atlantic. The culmination of this secret cooperation occurred in July 1939. In a meeting that would remain classified for decades, a delegation of top Polish cryptologists, including Marian Rejewski, traveled to a clandestine rendezvous with their British counterparts. The handover took place not in some shadowy back alley of espionage lore, but on the secure grounds of the Woolwich military base in London. Here, in the sterile environment of a military installation, the Poles systematically laid bare every secret they had painstakingly uncovered. They presented the British with their own Polish-built Enigma replicas, detailed blueprints of the machine's internal wiring, and the designs for their electromechanical decryption aids. For the British delegation from the Government Code and Cipher School, GC and CS, it was a revelation that was equal parts stunning and humbling. They had been chipping away at the outer walls of the Enigma fortress for years with little success, only to be handed the master keys by allies who were staring down the barrel of annihilation. While the formal exchange happened under official military auspices, the act of transferring the physical materials was shrouded in a secrecy that felt torn from the pages of a spy thriller. The essence of the operation could be captured in a stark, dramatic image, a dark, foggy night at the docks, where indistinct figures move silently through the gloom. Under the cover of mist, heavy briefcases containing the rotor blueprints and decryption methodologies are passed from one small boat to another, their contents worth more than any cargo of gold. This artistic rendering, though perhaps not a literal account of the Woolwich meeting, perfectly encapsulates the gravity and the clandestine nature of the transfer, a precious, fragile secret being passed from one nation's hands to another's on the eve of global catastrophe. The importance of this moment cannot be overstated. It provided the British with a running start that saved them years of foundational research. Without the Polish contribution, the famed code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park might never have gotten off the ground in time to make a decisive impact on the war. The head of GC and CS, Sir Herbert O. Mackay, would later make a stark and candid admission that left no room for doubt about the significance of the Polish gift. Without this transfer, he confessed, we would not have been able to do anything. It was a frank acknowledgement that the foundations of one of the greatest Allied intelligence triumphs of the war were not laid in the halls of British academia or the corridors of Whitehall, but in the minds of a small group of brilliant Polish mathematicians who saw the storm coming and passed the torch just before the darkness fell. The invaluable intelligence gifted by the Polish Cipher Bureau provided the Allies with a critical foundation, but it was a foundation on shifting sands. The German military, ever confident in their system, were continuously refining Enigma's operational procedures, increasing the number of rotors in use and complicating the daily setup protocols. The Polish methods, while brilliant, were becoming too slow to keep pace with these changes. For every new layer of complexity the Germans added, the time required to find the daily key grew exponentially. The codebreakers at Britain's clandestine Bletchley Park facility found themselves in a desperate race against the clock. Each day at midnight, the Enigma settings across the entire German military network would change, rendering the previous day's work obsolete. A solution that arrived 24 hours and 1 minute late was no solution at all. What was needed was not just a smarter approach, but a faster one, a way to automate the mind-numbing logical grunt work of testing tens of thousands of potential rotor settings and plugboard connections every single day. This monumental challenge fell to the eccentric genius of Alan Turing. Working alongside his colleague Dilworth, Turing conceived of an electromechanical device that would take the foundational concepts of the Polish Bombe cryptologiczna and evolve them into something far more powerful and versatile. Turing's insight was to design a machine that didn't just test potential keys, but actively hunted for logical contradictions within the encrypted text. By exploiting certain operational tics and predictable formats in German messages, such as stereotyped weather reports or salutations, Turing realized he could program a machine to rapidly cycle through all possible Enigma settings, automatically discarding any that produced a logical inconsistency. It was, in essence, a machine built to find the single coherent needle of a correct decryption within a haystack of quintillions of nonsensical gibberish. This theoretical leap marked the true birth of automated cryptanalysis, shifting the battlefield from one of human calculation to one of machine-driven logic. The physical manifestation of this idea was the Bombe, a hulking, imposing machine that bore little resemblance to its elegant theoretical underpinnings. Its construction, which began in earnest in early 1940, was a testament to the wartime spirit of invention and improvisation. In a detail that underscores the ad hoc nature of the top-secret project, the casing for the very first prototype was cobbled together using components scavenged from disassembled coffee grinders. This humble origin stood in stark contrast to the machine's sophisticated purpose. Inside its frame, a series of drums, each wired to perfectly replicate the scrambling effect of an Enigma rotor, spun at high speed, connected by a tangle of cables that mimicked the Enigma's plugboard. When running, the bomb was a cacophony of rhythmic, clicking relays and whirring rotors, an electromechanical brain thinking faster than any human ever could. To the engineers and operators at Bletchley Park who worked with it, the bombe was an arcane and wondrous device. Its face was a complex web of plugs and sockets, and its operation was a dizzying dance of logic and electricity. Its intimidating presence and seemingly impenetrable function led one of its engineers to offer a piece of affectionate, gallows humor, jokingly referring to the machine as a black box that tangles wires better than any language. The description was perfect. The bombe's entire purpose was to navigate an impossibly tangled electronic labyrinth, following every conceivable path until it found the one that led to a logical conclusion, at which point it would stop, providing the codebreakers with a potential Enigma key. After months of frantic work, the moment of truth arrived. On March 18, 1940, the first operational bombe, nicknamed Victory, was tested against a live intercept. The team of cryptographers and engineers gathered as the machine was switched on, its drums beginning their high-speed spin, the clicks of its relays filling the hut like 1,000 metallic heartbeats. Minutes turned into hours, the tension mounting with every rotation. Then, silence. The machine had stopped. It had identified a valid configuration. The settings were quickly transferred to a British-built Enigma replica, and for the first time, a German message intercepted that same day was successfully deciphered through purely automated means. The theory had been proven correct. Turing's bombe worked. This successful test was more than just a technical milestone, it was the dawning of a new age. Automated cracking was no longer a theoretical dream but a practical, war-winning reality, and Bletchley Park was about to transform from a small collection of academics into an industrial-scale intelligence factory. Nowhere was the impact of Bletchley Park's breakthrough felt more profoundly than in the cold, gray expanses of the North Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous military campaign of the Second World War, was Britain's lifeline. Convoys of merchant ships, laden with food, fuel, and war materials from North America, were the nation's artery, and Germany's U-boats were the razor intent on severing it. The entire German submarine strategy, orchestrated by Admiral Karl Donitz, relied on a revolutionary tactic, the wolfpack. Individual U-boats, spread across vast tracts of ocean, would report convoy sightings via Enigma encrypted messages to their central command. Command would then use Enigma to coordinate a mass attack, with multiple submarines converging on the convoy simultaneously. The secrecy and speed of these encrypted communications were the lifeblood of the wolfpack, and for the first 2 years of the war, they were devastatingly effective. Then came Ultra. The ability to decipher the Kriegsmarine's most secret signals in near real time was the equivalent of placing a spy inside Donitz's headquarters. The codebreakers at Bletchley Park could suddenly see the entire German chessboard. They could pinpoint where the U-boats were being directed to patrol, identify the planned locations for ambushes, and track the assembly points for wolfpacks before they could strike. This intelligence was a weapon of almost unimaginable power, turning the vast, featureless ocean into a transparent battlefield. The Admiralty in London could now redirect convoys, steering them around the invisible cordons of lurking submarines. The hunter, for the first time, was becoming the hunted. The results were not just anecdotal, they were statistically staggering. By 1942, as the Bletchley Park code-breaking operation matured into a highly efficient intelligence factory, its influence on the convoy war became quantifiable. Thanks to Ultra, Allied Naval Command was able to intercept German orders and successfully reroute their convoys to avoid U-boat concentrations 30% more often than before. A 30% shift in a battle of attrition on this scale was monumental. It meant more ships getting through, more supplies reaching Britain, and fewer lives lost to the torpedoes of an unseen enemy. Each successful decryption in a quiet English country house translated directly into saved ships and saved sailors hundreds of miles away. The uncanny effectiveness of this Allied counter-strategy did not go unnoticed on the German side. For the U-boat crews, the experience was deeply unsettling and demoralizing. They would receive their encrypted orders, meticulously follow them to the designated coordinates in the mid-Atlantic, and arrived to find nothing but empty ocean. Convoys they were told would be there had vanished, seemingly into thin air. Worse still, they would sometimes arrive at a rendezvous point only to be met by heavily armed anti-submarine escorts and long-range patrol bombers. As if their ambush had been anticipated. A chilling rumor began to circulate among the German submariners, a whispered suspicion born of frustration and mounting losses. They claimed that the Allies were fighting with an almost supernatural advantage, that it was as if they were reading our minds. They could not comprehend how their movements, protected by the supposedly unbreakable Enigma, were being so perfectly countered. This sentiment, spreading through the German U-boat fleet, was the psychological echo of Bletchley Park's silent victory. Imagine the scene on the bridge of a convoy escort, a lone destroyer pitching and rolling in the heart of a North Atlantic gale. The wind howls, and icy spray lashes against the windows. The helmsman fights to hold his course, his knuckles white on the wheel. Suddenly, the radio operator appears, clutching a flimsy piece of paper, an urgent telegram. The message is short, cryptic, and absolute: route changed. Alter course immediately. No explanation is given, no reason for the sudden, drastic deviation from their planned route. The captain reads it, his face grim, and gives the order. In the storm-tossed darkness, the convoy slowly, arduously begins to turn. That single, unexplained order, executed in blind faith, is the final, life-saving link in a chain stretching back to Alan Turing's bomb. The telegram is the physical proof that the murky, complex mathematics of decryption had been forged into a shield, silently turning aside a blow that the men on the ship would never even know was coming. By late 1941, the German High Command, particularly within the Kriegsmarine, could no longer ignore the mounting and often inexplicable losses their U-boat fleet was suffering. While their faith in the fundamental security of the Enigma machine remained unshaken, the pattern of failed ambushes and surprisingly effective Allied anti-submarine warfare was too consistent to be dismissed as mere bad luck or isolated espionage. They concluded not that the machine itself was compromised, but that its operational security could be enhanced. Their solution was characteristic of their engineering-focused mindset: if the existing system was good, a more complex version would be better. They decided to up the cryptographic ante, triggering a new and more desperate phase in the secret war of wits being waged between their engineers and the codebreakers at Bletchley Park. The German countermove came swiftly and decisively. On February 15, 1942, the Kriegsmarine introduced a significant upgrade to the Enigma machines used by the U-boat fleet for coordinating their Atlantic operations. This new model, the M4, was a direct response to the perceived vulnerabilities. Its critical innovation was the addition of a fourth rotor to the standard three-rotor setup. This seemingly simple change had a staggering effect on the machine's complexity. The introduction of a fourth will increase the number of possible rotor configurations and daily keys by an order of magnitude, plunging the codebreakers back into a cryptographic darkness that was deeper and more profound than any they had faced before. The U-boat traffic, the most vital source of intelligence for the Battle of the Atlantic, went silent. For the German cryptographers who designed and implemented the M4, this upgrade represented the pinnacle of security. They considered the four-rotor Enigma to be, for all practical purposes, truly unbreakable. Their confidence was not just a matter of military pride, it was a conclusion they reached after rigorous analysis. In a little-known detail that reveals the depth of their belief, German cryptographers consulted with leading physicists from the prestigious Kaiser Wilhelm Society to validate their assumptions about the M4's mathematical impregnability. They believed they had created a cipher that was so far beyond the computational capacity of any potential adversary that it guaranteed the secrecy of their naval communications for the foreseeable future. This fusion of military engineering and high-level academic consultation created a powerful institutional conviction: the M4 was their silver bullet, the technological fix that would restore the U-boat's deadly edge. This German escalation represents a critical turning point in the wider conflict, a moment that dramatically accelerated the cryptographic arms race. Just as in the more visible arenas of war, where new tanks prompted the development of better anti-tank guns, and faster fighters led to improved interceptors, this move in the invisible world of signals intelligence was a direct technological challenge. Bletchley Park's hard-won advantage was wiped out overnight. The flow of ultra-intelligence regarding U-boat movements, which had become the central pillar of the Allies' convoy defense strategy, was severed. The period that followed the introduction of the M4 was known as a blackout, a terrifying time when the convoys were once again sailing blind, and U-boat wolfpacks began to exact a terrible and rising toll. Germany's decision to upgrade their encryption was not just a technical adjustment, it was an act that redefined the terms of the secret war, forcing the Allied codebreakers into a desperate scramble to innovate or face catastrophic defeat in the battle for the Atlantic. Despite the technical reinforcement of the Enigma system, the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic did not decisively turn back in Germany's favor. Allied convoys continued to display an uncanny ability to evade U-boat wolfpacks, and German submarines were being hunted with a new and lethal efficiency. The sheer statistical impossibility of it all began to gnaw at the edges of the German High Command's steadfast confidence. The official doctrine remained unchanged: Enigma was infallible. But on the front lines and in the hushed corridors of naval headquarters, a dangerous and subversive question began to form: what if the unthinkable were true? The first signs of doubt emerged not as official reports or analytical memos, but as whispers, battlefield rumors of a Proboem, a breach. These were the nervous, fragmented accounts of surviving U-boat crews who spoke of perfectly laid ambushes on empty seas and of Allied hunter-killer groups appearing as if summoned by magic. These persistent and unsettling rumors eventually grew too loud to ignore, percolating up the chain of command until they reached the very top. The figure most existentially invested in the security of naval communications was Grand Admiral Karl Donitz, the architect of the entire U-boat strategy. According to a persistent rumor that circulated within the Kriegsmarine's inner circles, a deeply concerned Donitz began to take matters into his own hands. Unable to reconcile the flawless theory of Enigma with the disastrous reality in the Atlantic, he allegedly began to personally summon senior cipher officers and operators for intense, private questioning. These were not formal inquiries but tense, inquisitorial sessions aimed at finding a human explanation for the leak. Donitz, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail, was hunting for spies, for procedural errors, for traitors, for any rational explanation that did not involve the compromise of the machine itself. The image of the powerful Grand Admiral, his U-boat fleet being decimated, interrogating his own communications expert speaks volumes of the growing desperation and paranoia gripping the German command. These internal investigations, however, immediately ran into a formidable cultural and psychological barrier: the quasi-religious faith that the operators themselves had in their equipment. The Enigma was not just a tool, it was a masterpiece of German engineering, a symbol of their technological superiority. To question the machine was to question the very foundation of their perceived strength. This institutional arrogance is perfectly captured in a telling anecdote from one of these high-level interrogations. Frustrated by the repeated questions about his procedures, a German cipher clerk, when pressed on the possibility that the machine itself could have a flaw, is said to have retorted with a defiant sarcasm: "If the Enigma isn't perfect, you might as well sell it for scrap." This single, flippant remark reveals the core of the German dilemma. The belief in Enigma was so total, so deeply ingrained, that the idea of it being broken was literally absurd to the men who used it every day. The clerk's response was not just insubordination, it was a statement of faith. In his mind, and in the minds of his superiors, there were only two possibilities: either the Enigma was the perfect, unbreakable cipher they believed it to be, or it was worthless junk. There was no middle ground for a partial or intermittent compromise. Faced with this level of dogmatic conviction, the internal investigation stalled. Lacking any concrete proof and confronted by a wall of institutional denial, the German command was forced to conclude that the leaks must be originating from other sources: Allied espionage, lucky reconnaissance, or British treachery. The real source of the problem, the brilliant minds and clicking machines of Bletchley Park, remained safely shrouded in secrecy, and Germany's most vital secrets continued to pour into the hands of its enemies. Of all the strategic theaters where ultra-intelligence played a decisive role, none was more critical than the planning and execution of Operation Overlord, the D-Day landings of June 1944. This was the Allies' great gamble, a monumental amphibious invasion that would determine the fate of Western Europe. Its success hinged on thousands of variables, but the most crucial were surprise and an accurate understanding of the enemy's strength and disposition. In the months leading up to the invasion, Bletchley Park became the nerve center for building a comprehensive and astonishingly detailed picture of the German military machine in France. Ultra provided the Allied High Command with a level of insight that was unprecedented in the history of warfare, transforming the invasion from a perilous leap in the dark into a calculated, intelligence-driven assault. The decrypted signals allowed the Allies to map out the German order of battle with meticulous accuracy. They knew the location, strength, and readiness of nearly every German division in Western Europe. They could track the movements of the formidable panzer divisions, Hitler's mobile reserve, which posed the single greatest threat to any landing force. They read reports on the state of the coastal defenses of the Atlantic Wall, learning about weak points, gaps in command, and shortages of supplies. This constant stream of high-grade intelligence was the invisible scaffolding upon which the entire invasion plan was built. It informed every major decision, from the choice of the Normandy beaches themselves, an area the Germans considered a less likely target, to the elaborate deception plans designed to convince Hitler that the main landing would come at the Pas-de-Calais. The final, nail-biting hours before the launch of the invasion fleet provided the ultimate testament to Ultra's power. As tens of thousands of soldiers prepared to embark, the Allied commanders needed absolute certainty that their intelligence was current and correct. On the very eve of the invasion, June 5, 1944, a final, crucial piece of the puzzle slotted into place. A series of freshly decrypted Enigma messages provided definitive information confirming the concentration and positioning of German troops in western France. This last-minute intelligence was the final green light. It assured General Eisenhower and his staff that the Germans had not detected the true target of the invasion and that their main defensive forces remained positioned away from the Normandy coast. The dice of war were about to be thrown, but Ultra had ensured they were loaded in the Allies' favor. This unprecedented level of insight gave substance to the famous, and entirely literal, boast of Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, who noted in his reports to the General Headquarters, GHQ, "We knew the German plan better than they did themselves." This was not hyperbole. By reading the daily communications between German field commanders and their superiors, the Allies could follow the enemy's thought processes in near real time. They knew what the Germans were anticipating, what they were worrying about, and how they planned to react to a landing. They had, in effect, a copy of the enemy's playbook before the game had even begun. This strategic omniscience can be distilled into a single, powerful image, a dimly lit command post on the night before the landings. The air is thick with tension and tobacco smoke. By the flickering light of candles or a single bare bulb, staff officers are hunched over vast maps of the Normandy coast. A courier enters, handing them a slip of paper, the latest Ultra decrypt. A quiet, intense discussion follows. A line is erased, an arrow is redrawn, a friendly unit's objective is subtly shifted. The lives of thousands of men, the success of the entire operation, are being adjusted and fine-tuned based on the enemy's own secret words, intercepted and laid bare only hours before. This was the ultimate application of the intelligence war, turning the enemy's most secure communications into a weapon directed against them at the most critical moment in the conflict. In the cold calculus of war, victory is often measured in territory gained, enemies defeated, and objectives secured. The impact of intelligence, however, is a far more elusive metric, an invisible current that shapes the flow of battle in ways that are rarely seen and almost never officially acknowledged. Yet, in the case of Ultra, the Allied decryption of the Enigma codes, the profound and quantifiable impact on the outcome of the Second World War is nothing short of staggering. The silent intellectual victory achieved in the huts of Bletchley Park was directly responsible for saving hundreds of thousands of lives, altering the strategic timeline of the conflict, and hastening the defeat of the Axis powers. The most direct and dramatic impact was felt in the Battle of the Atlantic. This long, brutal campaign was not just a naval struggle, it was the essential precondition for all Allied operations in Europe. Had the U-boat wolfpacks succeeded in severing Britain's maritime lifeline, there would have been no build-up for D-Day, no sustained bombing campaign, and potentially no way for Britain to continue the fight. Post-war historical analysis, able to cross-reference Allied naval records with captured German war diaries, has produced a stunning consensus. The intelligence provided by Ultra is estimated to have shortened the Battle of the Atlantic by at least 2 years. The consequence of this, measured in human terms, is even more profound. By allowing convoys to be rerouted around waiting U-boats and enabling Allied hunter-killer groups to proactively target them, historians have calculated that Ultra directly saved more than 700,000 lives at sea that would have otherwise been lost. This ability to read Germany's most secret orders was a decisive strategic advantage that went far beyond individual tactical encounters. It allowed the Allies to avoid their enemy's greatest strengths while exploiting their every weakness. Instead of blindly sailing into meticulously planned ambushes, the convoys could be navigated through safe corridors, transforming the Atlantic from a deadly hunting ground into a managed logistical highway. This not only saved lives and precious cargo but also accelerated the entire Allied war effort. Every ship that was not sunk, every soldier that was not drowned, and every tank that was not lost to the deep was a resource that could be brought to bear on the battlefields of Europe. By preventing catastrophic losses and ensuring the successful transport of men and material, Ultra fundamentally shortened the overall duration of the war, saving countless additional lives across all fronts. Yet, for some of the men who directly benefited from this invisible shield, the profound secrecy of Ultra created a strange and deeply personal paradox. In a little-known postscript to the convoy war, it has been revealed that some Allied naval veterans remained silent about their experiences for decades, not just because of the trauma of combat, but because they feared that the uncanny luck of their survival might put them under suspicion. Their ships had a seemingly miraculous habit of zigging when U-boats were zagging, of changing course just hours before entering a known danger zone. To an outside observer unaware of Ultra, such consistent good fortune could be misinterpreted as evidence of collaboration or an information leak. These veterans, whose lives were saved by the best-kept secret of the war, were haunted by the fear that their improbable survival might one day be investigated as a crime. It is a poignant final irony that the very intelligence that guaranteed their return home also shrouded their experience in a silence born of caution and fear. The story of the Enigma machine and its eventual defeat is more than just a pivotal chapter in the history of the Second World War, it is a foundational parable for our modern technological age. It transcends the specifics of rotor mechanics and cipher keys to offer timeless and deeply resonant lessons about the complex relationship between human ingenuity, technological faith, and the catastrophic consequences of intellectual arrogance. The silent, secret war waged by the codebreakers was not merely a battle of minds against a machine, but a clash of two fundamentally opposing philosophies, the echoes of which continue to shape our world today, from the corridors of national security agencies to the design of the digital systems that underpin our daily lives. The most stark and devastating lesson is a warning against the seductive danger of blind faith in technology. The German High Command's unshakable conviction in Enigma's invincibility was not just a strategic miscalculation, it was a profound failure of critical thinking. They had created a system so complex and so brilliant in their own eyes that they could not conceive of its failure. This dogma, enforced from the very top, stifled doubt and dismissed anomalies, creating an echo chamber of self-assurance even as their U-boats were being sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. The story of Enigma is the ultimate proof that an absolute trust in technology, when left unchecked and unquestioned, can be weaponized against its creators. It serves as a permanent reminder that such certainty is a luxury that can cost innocent lives on an unimaginable scale, turning a nation's greatest perceived strength into its most fatal vulnerability. In direct and powerful contrast stands the intellectual ethos of Bletchley Park, a philosophy of relentless skepticism and profound humility. The codebreakers never saw Enigma as an unsolvable monolith, they saw it as a system designed by fallible humans and operated by fallible soldiers, and therefore, it had to have flaws. Their success was built on the constant questioning of assumptions, the pursuit of every tiny anomaly, and the collaborative power of diverse minds attacking a problem from every conceivable angle. This spirit was perhaps best encapsulated in a simple, poignant line from a letter written by the effort's guiding genius, Alan Turing: "The most terrible mistake is to think that you are infallible." This was not just a personal belief, it was the foundational principle of their entire operation. It was this acceptance of fallibility, in themselves, their enemies, and the technologies they fought, that gave them the critical edge. Today, the legacy of that struggle endures, not in whirring electromechanical drums, but in the silent, humming server racks of the digital age. Picture a modern cryptographer, sitting before the cool glow of a computer screen, lines of complex code scrolling past. The tools are infinitely more powerful, the ciphers exponentially more complex, but the fundamental challenge remains the same. As this analyst works to secure a global banking network or probes for vulnerabilities in a state-sponsored hacking tool, they are looking back at the shadows of the past. In the intricate dance of algorithms, they see the ghosts of Enigma's rotors. In the hunt for a single exploitable flaw in millions of lines of code, they feel the echo of the daily race against the midnight key change. They work with the heavy, humbling knowledge bequeathed by Turing and his colleagues, that no system is perfect, that human error is a constant, and that the most dangerous assumption of all is to believe you have created something that is truly unbreakable. The Enigma story is not over, it simply continues in a new language.